Hello, everybody. It's week 11, and we are starting to work with 3D projects, right? With 3D game development. Last week we finished our platformer. This week we'll start simple things, like we'll start with particle emitters and particle systems, and with terrain. Right. So what we have to do first, we have to create a new project. Right, new Unity project. Let's call it 3D game. We have to select this option 3D, and we can add some packages. Sorry, we can add some packages at that point, because we want to build terrain and because we want to enjoy it later. We'll add characters, and we'll add environment. You have also the whole package with particle systems that you can play with. You can take a look at it. I'm not adding it right now because I want to build my own particle system. But this package contains different different particle systems. So actually, you know what? Let's add it, and this way you will be able to see what you can really do with particle systems. Okay, so 3 packages: particle system, environment, and characters. Done. And create project. I don't like this path. 3D game. And it will take a few minutes to get all the packages in the project. In the meantime, I received your emails with group registration. I will set up the groups on Blackboard today, and GDD will be delivered through the group submission on Blackboard. Right, I will send additional notification when everything is set and ready for your submissions. And then next step, next week, I would like to see your first version, right? First level designed and with some functionality, hopefully, right? Depending on your group and the group size, those requirements are a little different, right? If you're working alone, there is only one level, so my expectation for the next week is that the level will be designed and some basic functionalities there. For bigger teams, I expect to see the first level playable. Right, I want to be able to see it. You don't have to make any submission on Blackboard for that milestone, but in the lab, I'll be asking you for what you did, and I want to see it in the lab.
So the description,
the GDD, game design document. Game design document should be similar to what you submitted for assignment. Of course, you don't have to include screenshots because you're working on the game. But I want to see at least some drawings of your ideas for different levels, right? So based on that, we build some expectations, right? Game description, design of your levels, the assets that you need, and so on. And that's your submission, right? That's what you should submit. Okay, we have the project created. What I have in my project view, right? I have standard assets and lots of stuff there. I have characters, and in characters, I have both first person and the third person, and the ball. If I want to play with the ball in 3D, I have also controller that is shaped like a ball. It's a third person controller, but not a humanoid. It's a ball that you can play with. I have environment, and in environment, we have a speed tree with different, well, 3 types of trees. We have terrain assets. So what do we have there? We have some textures for grass, and we have surface textures. Cliff, grass, rocky, some mud, right? Different types of terrain assets. Those are the assets that you can paint over the terrain. And then we have water, different prefabs for water. We'll see how we can use them. This is very basic set of assets. The water is not that terrific, and it's basically an imitation of the surface of the water. Then we have particle systems. And in prefabs, if you take a look, you have all kinds of stuff. Fireworks, fire, hose, smoke, and so on, right? We'll see how they look and how complex they are when you want to build something like that, right? You see that it's prefabs containing prefabs, and the layer is there are many layers in those particle systems. Okay. We have some physics materials. That's a default. Like we can do stuff with a surface with objects, right? Make them to respond to physics in a specific way. And that's all that we have, right? What we want to do today, we want to do 2 things. We want to play a little bit with the terrain, and I will show you basic tools, and I will ask you to continue on your own, to be creative. And then we want to use also play with some particle systems. Maybe we'll build fireworks or a volcano, right? So let's start with the terrain. I think it's quite fun with the terrain, and it's an interesting tool, right? So what we have to do, we have to add terrain to our game, right? To our scene. We are in 3D environment. Where is the terrain? It's in 3D object, and we have terrain here, right? Clicking, what it does, it adds this square, quite large square, to our scene. You can control the size of this terrain, of this square. It's going to the settings. It's the last tool when you select the terrain from the hierarchy. The last button is the settings. And you can change the size of the terrain here, and you can also change other settings. We've been talking about that in the lecture. Right, different distances, different resolutions for textures, and so on. So what you do, you click on the hierarchy on the terrain, and in the inspector you should see this, right? You click on the settings on the last button here, and you have basic settings for the terrain. When you add terrain as a game object, by default it has also a terrain collider. Right, so what you can do right away, you can take a character, say a first-person character. We will see everything through the eyes of the player, right? And in prefabs, you have two choices. You have FPS controller and you have rigid body FPS controller. Right? You have two prefabs. Let's select the first one, FPS controller. Let's add this guy to our game. That's where it is. It's in the corner of the terrain, and really it is kind of in the middle, right? Part of it is below. So if you play right now, your guy will fall. What you have to do, you have to pull it up. You have to pull it up, and you have to move it. Let's see this from, you have to put it on the ground. Now, if you play, we should land on the ground, and you can control your player with the mouse. Look up, look down, look around, and with the keys, right? So you can walk.
Go back to the view that you already have.
From the game view, just press escape, and it will release your mouse.
I initially had the terrain on the scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I played with the directions, now I don't see it.
Oh, you mean you click on the axis, right? You can click again, and you will be able to to look around. You can also double click on specific object, and it will allow you to change the view. Or you can click here. Where is it? And you can change it to free. Right click on the axis, and when you click free or perspective, it will change the view to the one that you had, right? You will be able to modify it.
How we can see our terrain? Like if we don't see our terrain, how we can go back and see our
Well, double click on the terrain, and then you can do right click on the axis and select free perspective. And you will be able to control the view on your screen, just holding right button and moving around. You can change what you see. Right, it will change into eye. Now, if you want to move, there is a hand that allows you to pan, right, to move the scene around. Zoom in and zoom out can be done with a scroll.
You lost your terrain?
everything?
You lost everything.
I lost everything. Oh.
Now, you can zoom with
Right, so if you play your game right now, you should be able to walk, plus you should be able to hear the steps. You can hear the soldier's boot tapping. Okay, so what we can do with the terrain? We can start painting it, right? You can first, your terrain by default is flat, right? The level is 0. You cannot go lower than this level. You cannot make a dent in the terrain. But you can make it higher, right? So the first thing that you want to do, you want to set some height for the beginning. You want to elevate everything. Because otherwise, there will be no way to make a valley. You can elevate it in 2 ways. First, you can select the first tool, rise. Make sure that the opacity is not set to 0, because then you cannot do anything. Opacity should be a little bit higher. In my case, it's 36. You can play with this number. You can set the brush size, the size of the dot that appears on the terrain. And now, when you're clicking, you're elevating the terrain, right? If your opacity is higher, 100, you do it very rapidly, right? If it's lower, then it's not that rapid. You can select different shapes of your brushes, and you can achieve different results. Another option for us is using the second tool, paint height. What you can do in this tool, if you take a look at the I'm sorry, if you take a look at the settings for the second tool, you have brush size, you have opacity, but you have also height. Let's say 10. What happens? I can paint a flat terrain. Everything is flattened to the same height. Your opacity is 0. Maybe you set your, whatever you have is higher than the height that you set. I'll be there and I will check. Okay. Now, if you want to flatten your terrain, right? You don't want it to be that high. You can always hold Shift and go the opposite, right? So with the first tool, with the rise lower terrain, you can select the first tool. If you hold Shift, you're making you're lowering the terrain. And depending on the type of the brush that you're using, you have different effects. Now, in most cases, when you're using those brushes, the result is quite rough. And those rough spikes or high spikes, they don't look good in a game. That's why we have the third tool that is called Smooth Height. What it does, it basically makes all those spikes more smooth, more round. Of course, you're losing on the height, but the final effect, in most cases, it looks better. The next tool, Paint Texture, one that looks like a brush, allows us to add textures to the terrain. So right now, this terrain looks like ice, right, or snow. It's white. First thing that you have to do, you have to edit textures. So you have to add textures that you want to use in the terrain. You click on the edit texture. First, you select the brush, Paint Texture, and you click on the button, Edit Textures. The options that you have is Add Textures, Edit Texture, Remove Texture, right? We don't have any textures added. We have to add our first one. 2 textures that can be added. One is required, the first one. So you have the terrain selected, you click on the brush, and on the button, Edit Textures. And then Add Textures. You have to select one texture, right? Right now, we don't have anything. You click on the Select button in the box. And what we want to select is Rocky Albedo. Grass Rocky Albedo. You have to scroll down, and that will be our first texture. You say Add, and everything on your terrain turns grassy. That's our base. And what we'll do now, we'll add more textures, and we'll be able to paint on top of that. Right, so I can add more. Edit Texture, Add Texture, select. I have Mud Rocky Albedo Specular, and I have Brass Hill. Now what I can do, having this 2 or 3 different textures, I can select texture from this list and select the brush, and I can start painting. Now, depending on your opacity and texture strength, you will see that you can have different effects. The textures are mixed, right? They're blended. Let me show you what happens. Take a look at the bottom of the screen. This is what camera will see, right? I start painting, and gradually I can add one texture on top of another one, right? So I'm adding this muddy stuff on top. Let's use grass and see how that will change, right? I can paint it green. You can start with really large brush and paint some stuff with the texture that you like. And then you can mix other textures with it. Oops. Changing either the brush size or reducing opacity or reducing the texture strength. And it will be gradually blending this new texture into what you have, right? So let's say I want to make this more muddy.
Mine is still changing the height. While I'm using the brush, it's still changing the height.
It shouldn't. We can add more textures. We have sand. We can paint with sand.
You said it prevents them, right?
Yeah. If you, depending on how strong is your target, I mean, how strong is the texture, the last setting, right? And the opacity, the top one can be stronger or lighter, right? You can see only pieces of it, like blended in, or it can simply paint over the base. Yeah, you just click on the texture. Let's say the sand, I added sand. And I'm painting, right?
Is there something else that we have to set up to see the result?
No.
Maybe the strength.
It's working.
You just make zero. You're not doing anything. You set it to 1, you're painting total over the base. So like you set it to something, yeah, then you will be blending between them.
Actually see something different about maybe.
houses will have to.
Okay. When we are happy with the result, and that usually takes a long time because you're trying different blends, you're adding different textures and so on. Well, you can check how your terrain looks right now. Right, we have some sand, we have some rocks, and the grass. But this is just flat, this is textures, right? I can move my player a little bit farther in the terrain. I have some hills and some valleys and so on. What else we can do? We can add we can add some bigger elements like trees. That's another tool. Place tree. To place tree in the scene, you need to add the mod, the prefab, really, for the tree. Similarly to the paint textures, you have to edit trees, and you have to add tree. As you see, we are searching for the prefab. Let me show you what we have. In environment, speed trees, we have 3 different kinds. We have broadleaf, conifer, and palm. And there should be the prefabs for those trees. Branches. Right, so what we want to do, we want to edit tree, add tree, select, right, the dot. And we can select the tree. Let's say a broadleaf. Broadleaf desktop, we're building a desktop version. You select it, and you hit add. You can add other trees as well. Edit tree, add tree. Broadleaf desktop. The other one is conifer. Conifer. Looks like pine or cedar. We'll use these 2 kinds of trees in our game. Okay, let's select where those trees will grow. Let's say we'll put some broadleaves here on the bottom, and conifers will be in this elevated part of the terrain. Right? So I have to select the tree. I have to decide how big is my brush again. Right? This is too big. I need to go smaller. And I have to decide how many trees I want to spawn at once. 83, it will be very dense. right? If I start clicking with 83, it's quite dense. I can go lower with this number. I can also play with the height of the tree. I can randomize this. I can have big trees and small trees. And now I can paint my forest. I can increase the brush size if I want more. Right, that's my forest. I can change to the conifer and do the same thing on top. If I want to mix these two trees, I can do it as well. Now it looks more like the real environment, right? You have some grass, you have some trees. It's quiet, it's bright. With shift. So if you think it's too dense, you can always remove those trees with holding a shift. Okay, so you have some trees. Now it's time to add some smaller elements. And again, in this terrain assets, we have some smaller things like grass. You can select this. We have to edit details. And we can add details mesh, and we can add grass texture. What it does, it basically creates more realistic elements. Let's see if we have any No, we have to download stuff from the asset store. Okay, so edit details, grass texture. We have grass, that's for sure. So we can select, for example, grass front alpha, add. And close this one. And we can paint with this the same way we paint with textures, right? So selecting the brush size, changing the opacity to something higher, and the target strength to something higher, we can paint grass. This is a little bit too strong. And you can add something that really sticks out of this flat texture. Remember that when you scroll out, you can see those details only when you're close. If you scroll out, they disappear. So when you want to paint details, make sure that you're close to the terrain. How it looks in the game? Maybe we should paint something closer to the player. So something here. Okay. That's what you have in your game, right? You're painting textures, but those textures are have a little bit of animation, right? They swing. Okay. With this is your base, right? Your building environment. Now you can start adding models. You can start adding other elements. If you're looking for more ideas for your terrain and what you can do with the terrain, you can always go to the asset store, right? You can go to asset store, and for example, you can search for speed tree. You have the basic pack that is there, the free speed tree pack. This is the pack that you have already downloaded, right? It's a conifer, palm, and broadleaf. Others are quite expensive. Right, that's the only speed tree that is free. But you have also other models of trees that you can download for free. Some Mediterranean, some packs. Let's check this pack 2. That's the tree that you can get from the pack. You can also download some models. Right, so if you want to add some, I don't know, buildings, rocks, you can download some stuff from the asset store. Let's download this rock and boulder 3D model environment pack. Yeah. Come on. Okay, now it's downloading. Okay, it seems that it will take some time to get this. We have the terrain. We'll wait for the pack to be downloaded. Let's go back to the scene and let's create something else.
I don't have access to Apple's assets. This is the first time. Okay. You have the internet connection? Yes. And I go here. Yeah.
I would say everything is start and it's what I like. Yeah.
Just save the scene.
Save the scene.
And that's a good suggestion. If you want to keep what you did, save the scene. Okay, what I want to add, right, the second part, as I said, will be about particle effects, right, and particle systems or particle emitters. I did build this big mountain here. I want to make it in the volcano. So what I will do, I will add particle system. I will move it into right place will be the top of my volcano. Somewhere there. I should probably flatten a little bit my volcano a little bit. Now it's unzipping the package, so I have to wait. I will put my particle system inside this dent in the middle, and I will see what I can do with the particle system to imitate first smoke and second lava. And of course, what you can do to start with, you can take a look at the emitters, the particle systems that we have in the environment package. Sorry, not in the environment package, but in the particle system package that we've added. Right? You have some effects there. Not necessarily all of them fitting exactly into this context, but you can play with them. Okay. Import. It's a quite big package, so it takes some time to import. What do you want to see in the game?
I'm not sure if I know what you're asking for. I'm sure if I know. Sorry? No, it's slow. Oh, I want to see something. It's on probably somewhere below. Select right now you can select the player and set the position somewhere in this right about this.
Okay, let's see if I can do something. Okay, it's imported. So let's put the particle system where we want it to be, which is somewhere here. right? If we take a look at it from a side, we'll see that it's in the volcano, right? Obviously, those particles are not big enough and are not flying fast enough. We cannot see them from the bottom. We want them to be above the volcano. So let's make the lifetime of the particle longer, make the whole cycle longer, and see right now, I can see them, right? And that's more or less what I want to have. Right now, I will go closer to this particle effect. Right, let's do it from this angle. Because I want to edit, right? First thing that I want to edit the shape. Let's scroll down. Shape. It's cone, and cone is okay, but I need bigger cone. Right? I need a radius that is bigger, because it's a volcano, right? That's more like it, a big hole. Now you have few options, right? First, you can control angle and the radius of the cone. And you can decide if you want to emit the particles from the base, from the base shell, or from the volume or volume shell. What's the difference? They appear in the different places, right? If you emit from the base, it's emitting from the circle that is on the base, and they follow the cone in terms of how they're distributed. You have to select the particle system and scroll down. There is a shape module, right? If you click on it, it expands, and you have different settings. You can select the shape, right? The cone is the default shape, and we like it, right? It fits the purpose here. You can control angle and radius, right? 2 numbers. And then you can decide from where the particles are emitted, right? So if they're emitted from the base, you see where they appear, right? I can scroll closer. They appear on the bottom of this cone, right? If I select the shell, they're emitted from the circle, right? Not from the whole base, not from the surface, but only from this circle in the base. You can emit from the volume, and then they appear randomly inside the cone, or they can be emitted from the shell, which means from the wall of the cone. Right? And you're okay with the base. You can also make them to go in random directions. Because by default, they're kind of following the same path. All of them are going in the same direction. If you select random direction, you see that they behave in a little bit different way, right? They're more erratic. Okay, so we are okay with that. The next thing that we want to play with are the basic settings of our particles. They're quite small right now. Let's make them bigger. Right, so what we have to change their start size. We can randomize between two constants. So let's say there will be between 1 and 5, or maybe even 10. Smoke, it can be even 20. You can play with the color. Smoke, let's make it gray. And remember that we can add new functionalities, right? We can add new modules. So for example, we can play with the color and the size of particles over lifetime. Let's start with the size. You have to click on the circle, you have to add the checkbox there, and then you can expand and you can edit. We want to modify the size, and we want them to grow with the time. We want them to expand. How? Well, we can check linear. Maybe like that. We have to also set the target size, so how big they are at the end of the lifetime. We set our size to 20 in the beginning. 30 is too much. Set it to 20. 20 is too much. Let's say 10. 5. Yeah, maybe. And they start small and then they expand. Another thing is the color over lifetime. Another module that we want to add. And we want to have a gradient. And what we'll do, we'll start with the gray smoke. Can be almost dark, almost black. Because it's smoke, it should be a little bit transparent, right? So we can add some transparency. And then, oops, I didn't want to close it. And then for the end color, we can also select something grayish, but a little bit lighter. And add more transparency. So something like that. You can even make those particles to live longer. What else should we change? We should change the emission rate. So how many particles do we emit in one cycle? Our max particle is 1,000. It should be enough for this for this round. And we can increase the emission rate if we want to have more smoke. We have to make it lower if we want less. So we have our smoky mountain. We can add another particle system that will be emitting something that looks like fireballs. Right. So what I did, I duplicated the previous one. I renamed the first one to smoke, and I will rename the second one to lava. Lava definitely shouldn't be gray. It should be reddish or orange, right? Something like that. And lava definitely doesn't fly up the way that the smoke does. So what do we have to change? We have to change the gravity. And if I set it to 1, it will stay in the volcano. But if my gravity modifier will be something more than 0, we'll have it falling down, right? Now, if I change my, or if I disable, let's disable the color over lifetime module for this one. And let's make it into something that is not transparent. It is not, okay. Okay, now you can see those bubbles falling down, right? They're produced, and then they're kind of sliding down the hill. To make it more realistic, we can take a look if we have some materials in our assets that we could use to make those particles more, to look more like lava. Let's take a look at the particle systems. We have flames. So what we can do, we can try different particles, different materials, and you have them in standard assets, particle systems materials. And we can try those fireballs and flames and see if any of those will work for us. Right, so let's select the, say, flames. Not really. What do you think about it now? Another thing, you can use water and change the color. This one doesn't really work well with. No. Okay, let's go back to our fires. Let's make it darker.
Narrower?
Right?
Narrower? The way it's falling?
Yes. You have to edit the shape. And you can do this. You can change the, sorry. You can change the size. And you can put it in a different place, right? So for example, here, or you can even tilt it. Right now, so we have some error. We're not using this script. We're really not using any of them. Will be good time to run. So what I want you to do, I want you to play with this, see what you can do with the terrain, create your environment. It doesn't have to be exactly the same thing that we have here, right? Another thing that you can do with those emitters, and I told you that, you can add sub-emitters, right? And you can create effects like fireworks and so on. They can, for example, burst additional particles when they end their life, or on collision. Right? You have an example of fireworks in the standard assets. Particle system prefabs. You have fireworks here. You have a celebration. So I will finish the recording right now, but I still want you to test all those features that you have there, right? Play with it, see what you can do. Pick some particle systems that you have in standard assets and see how you can modify them and achieve different effects.